Allow me to introduce myself. Rodney Skinner, gentleman thief.
I thought invisibility would be a boon to my work. Well, you can imagine, it was my undoing. Once you're invisible, it's bloody hard to turn back.
Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite movies, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
LXG, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen came out in 2003. I literally was obsessed with this movie so much. I watched it all the time. I would go on the website and watch the clips because back then we didn't have YouTube. So they had the movie clips on the legit website, lxg.com I think it was, or something like that. And it was just complete obsession for me. And so I want to take a look back at it again and cover it because it is 20th Century Fox, but like I said all year round, Disney is buying 20th Century Fox out, so it's going to be added to its collection. And I also thought this would be a really great addition to start off Halloween and spooky time. Even though we have one more month before October, it is still spooky time officially by this point of year. So let's talk about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Before the Avengers were even a concept, and even before Justice League was trying to do superhero films, this was our first serious superhero action type film. It is based off of a comic book series, graphic novel series, written by Kevin O'Neill. And the entire idea is they're taking all of these classic literary characters and making them a team to fight off evil. Now we have the Avengers that can do it correctly, and we even have Suicide Squad that thought they could do it correctly and failed, but it's a lot more modern to do this type of idea today compared to how it was 15, 20 years ago. So it was something brand new, and even though it wasn't the best looking back, and now I can see so many flaws in this movie, I still feel such a connection to it, and it's still something that they tried. It was 2003, it didn't happen before, so you gotta give them credit for that. And even though it failed at the box office, I still love it. Now, I was a preteen during the time, and so it was just the most awesome thing I've ever seen back then, but I still think it holds up to be an enjoyable film. There are a lot of flaws, like I mentioned, and I really don't like how some of the characters ended up being. Now that I'm grown up, Mina Harker is amazing.
And my hips are none of your business.
Shoot! Go on. I guessed as much. That they would do anything to protect you.
You know, that's your biggest mistake. Thinking that I need them to protect me.
But they make her such a weak character. And I know it's the turn of the century. It takes place in 1899, so right at the turn of the century, the 19th century going to the 20th century. But it's just, I was like, you're such a badass vampire. I always was in love with her. Her character was amazing. She's played by Peta Wilson, and I just was completely obsessed. I wanted to be her. And I was obsessed with vampires, so I was just, everything's amazing. And now I'm just watching, and I know it was the time period was a little bit more realistic, but she's just so weak, and I feel like she could be so much more powerful. Sean Connery's character, Alan Quartermain, is the main character, and he got so annoying watching it again. Like, he's the leader of the group, whereas I learned in the graphic novel, Mina is actually a leader and she gets a team together. So the fact that they switch roles up makes things really annoying and infuriating to me because you just lost so much female empowerment. But then besides those characters, we have the rest of the team, and the rest of the team still is fantastic. They did a really great job with Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, played by Jason Fleming. Now I can't stop thinking about the Hulk because they look so similar together, just not green. And even the idea that they can grasp each other's minds and they're two different minded, but it's all the same person.
Don't be afraid.
Who says I'm afraid?
You stink of fear!
Quite the parlor trick.
You wait to see my next one.
Is very similar to Bruce and the Hulk, so I can't stop comparing that to this.
Always angry.
Well, we're the same, you and I. We're just a couple of hot-headed fools.
Yeah, same. Hulk like fire, Thor like water,
Well, we're kind of both like fire.
but Hulk like real fire.
But he still does his role with justice. I still really, really enjoyed his character. I love Dorian Gray. I love the idea of Dorian Gray. And Stuart Townsend, I also had a huge crush on back then because I was literally obsessed with this film. And he still does the role amazing. But now that I know more about Dorian Gray, I was also really frustrated the fact that the only way he can die is by physically looking at the picture. There's another series that did this idea of literary characters coming together to fight evil. Fantastic, called Penny Dreadful. And it was on Showtime for a couple seasons, and it is beyond extraordinary. I watched this a couple years ago, and it is perfection. It's near perfection. They take a couple of the same ideas of Dorian Gray and Dracula and anything that's like a gothic literature character, but it's a lot more uncensored and a lot more evenly paced because it goes through 3 seasons, so you can really take your time and learn about their backstories. And Dorian Gray is played by Reeve Carney, who I adore as well. He did a wonderful, wonderful job. And in his adaptation of it, he can look at the picture totally fine and doesn't die.
You've discovered my secret. Forever unchanging. My sins made manifest only here. At times I've deceived myself into thinking.
It's only when the actual picture is destroyed that he dies. So I like that interpretation a lot better than what they did here. But I do appreciate the character development between Dorian and Mina. I like their complicated love story between each other, but I also don't understand why Mina gets so afraid about him dying when he's immortal and she's immortal. Like, you are not gonna die, so why are you still freaking out about him getting hurt? That annoyed me so much now. We also have Captain Nemo and Skinner, and it was interesting because they could not get the rights to The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells was still too new, that it wasn't under the public domain like the rest of the characters were. So instead of having The Invisible Man, we have a Visible Man called Rodney Skinner, Gentleman Thief, and he is my favorite character still to this day. He was my favorite character back then, and is still my favorite. He is so underrated and literally makes the movie so much better than it already is.
And they'll provide an antidote. Well, that's if I'm a good boy.
And are you a good boy?
I guess you'll find out, won't you?
He's played by Tony Curran and did a fantastic, fantastic job. And I still adore him. He has the best lines. He gives the best performance. And he's invisible for half the movie, so great job to him. And then rounding out the team, we have Tom Sawyer. He's now a secret agent, and he's played by Shane West, who was also a really relevant actor back then. They all have to work together, end up fighting against M, who is played by Richard Roxburgh, who we talked about previously in other movies that we've seen. It's not a perfect movie. It has a lot of flaws, but overall it's still fantastic for what they were able to accomplish back then. You have to remember that it wasn't a modern thing to do all these insane assemble cast films like The Avengers and Justice League and etc, etc. I still feel like it gets so much hate, and I really do appreciate it. I mean, I know I have nostalgic ties to it, but I still can enjoy it, and I can still sit down and really just like this movie for what it is. They were supposed to come out with a sequel, but because of how it was received at the box office and the fights going on between the director and Sean Connery retired after this film, nothing ever got made. And that's such a shame because I would have loved to see a continuation of it. Even though it is underrated, I think it's underrated. A lot of people don't, but I still think it's underrated, and I would have liked to see a continuation. But at least we got Penny Dreadful, which is a different scenario, but honestly 1,000 times better. I really, really admire that show. It's the most comparable point of media to this film. It would be nice to see them do a genuine reboot of this film and be able to do all of the stories from the graphic novels, but it's something that I would never be able to expect, especially because it's a very unknown franchise still, and I'm not sure how much of a fan base it still holds, but it would be nice to look out for. But with that, it's a wrap on all our action films. And we're gonna start a new month tomorrow. It is spooky time, but there is still one more genre to talk about before we get into Halloween films. And we're gonna jump into comedies. So September, we're gonna start tomorrow with The Absent-Minded Professor. So you can stay tuned, and as always, I hope you have a magical day, and I will see you real soon.